helicopter powered over the snow-covered ski slopes, battling conditions that had already dropped a fresh 20 centimeters overnight. The downdraft rattled powdery white from the barren trees below. Just hours earlier, seasonal workers and holidaymakers had been dancing, singing at the top of their lungs at a silent disco. A close group of friends left the venue and moved on to an after-party, a gathering made up of mainly seasonal workers from all over the world. The house was located on Burfield Drive, which was ideal. This meant it was just a quick 5-minute walk from their own lodgings. Everyone there had work in the morning, and time was getting on. At 2 a.m, all of the friends left to walk home, apart from one. Ryan Stuker wanted to say some quick goodbyes to other partygoers. As his friends left, they saw him get up, pull on his coat, and he was ready to follow closely behind them. But what happens next seems to defy all logic.
So, I was thinking that maybe James and I would go to a ski resort for the winter.
The words of Ryan as he told his mother Heather of his plans. She said he seemed kind of nervous, not knowing what her reactions would be. This trip would pull the reins of adolescence until they snapped. Ryan would be an adult after that season away. They both must have known that after this trip, things would be different. But now, 6 years later, nobody could have fathomed just how different they would be. On December the 1st, 2017, Ryan left the family home to embark on the trip. His mother and his father Scott were excited for him to live his life, but they made sure that he knew he could come home at any time. Their door would always be open. Ryan Stuker was 20 years old when he came to the Sun Peaks Resort, somewhere normally known for skiing, snowboarding and partying. It's located in British Columbia, Canada. He was there to have the experience of a lifetime, working as a seasonal lift operator by day and socializing and enjoying the nightlife when the sun went down. He came here with his best friend James, the two of them excited for a whole season out in the mountains. You can just imagine how they must have felt, a season that would serve as a rite of passage into adulthood, and all the things that came with it. An insane level of freedom. It must have felt like a dream. The resort brings thousands of skiers and snowboarders each year, all of them eager to explore the 16 square kilometers of terrain. Sun Peaks spreads across 3 mountains: Todd Mountain, Sundance Mountain, and Mount Morrissey. And this is why it was so perfect for Ryan. He loved to snowboard. He came to Sun Peaks so that he could spend all of his free time on the slopes. At 6 feet tall with blonde hair and brown eyes, he was pretty easy to spot in a crowd. Ryan was living with roommates who, like him, had also come for the season. For some, it was their first time at the resort, whilst others were making their yearly return. The atmosphere in the resort for the seasonal workers was friendly. Everyone started to know everyone else, forming a close but temporary community from bumping into each other on the way to the slopes in the morning, and of course in the bars and house parties at night. Back home, dog Oscar would sit upstairs looking out the window down onto the street. Ryan and Oscar had a special bond, and the dog was waiting every day for his best friend to come home, sitting, watching, and waiting. The holiday season came around and Ryan didn't return home for Christmas. He missed his family, and his family certainly missed him. The Stuka household was quieter without him there, but they knew that in just a few weeks' time he would be home, and they could well have him for every other Christmas in their future. Absence really was making the heart grow fonder. December passed, as did January, and Ryan was now deep into the Sun Peaks lifestyle. 2 days after Valentine's Day on February the 16th, 2018, Ryan had worked his shift on the lifts that day, and then as night fell, he and some friends headed to a bar and grill. The event there was a silent disco, bringing together the other seasonal workers from across town. These are the nights where memories are made, the conversations over the next days and weeks spent reminiscing and trying to remember exactly what happened, who did what, where and when. The time came to leave the silent disco, but it wasn't yet time to call it a night. The friends were invited to a house party on Burfield Drive, so that is exactly where they went. When Ryan arrived at the party, it was busy. There were new faces there, people who were just starting out their season, and Ryan spent a lot of time getting to know them. He was especially excited when he found out that some of them snowboarded too. That was a huge part of the reason he was even there, so this meant he now had more people to hit the slopes with on his days off. Things just seemed to be getting better and better by the day. Ryan's housemates were the first to suggest leaving the party at around 2 a.m. Things were now slowly starting to wind down, and they all knew that if they didn't sleep soon, it would make the next day at work way too difficult. They stood up and shrugged on their big jackets to keep out the Canadian cold, and Ryan said he'd be right behind them, that he just had a couple more people to say goodbye to. Ryan had stood up and was getting ready to leave. He put on his coat and his shoes. Several people saw him doing this. He was definitely on his way out of the house to return home. Ryan's house was actually within eyesight to the party house on Burfield Drive. With the trees bare from the harsh winter, the house could be made out just down the slope. However, with conditions as they were, the friends would instead be taking the main road, a longer but safer route. The housemates then set off without Ryan, but thinking that if they walked slowly, Ryan would catch up soon. The snow was piled high on each side of the road as they walked. They walked carefully so as not to slip. One of the friends looked back into the darkness and they couldn't see Ryan. "Ryan," he called out, "are you there?" But there was only silence. His housemates shrugged. They hadn't seen Ryan drink too much, so they didn't feel too worried. They thought that maybe he'd found another party to go to and people to go with. After all, he'd been at Sun Peaks for over 3 months now. He knew what he was doing. "He'll just come home later," the housemates said to each other. The friends made the 5-minute walk home safely, but without Ryan. It was now that something must have gone very, very wrong. The next morning, Ryan didn't report to work. This was unusual for him. Ryan was usually punctual, reliable. He knew how good the feeling was of getting the first lift up and having the slopes completely to yourself. Ultimate peace. He'd even make sure that he was there early so that the lifts would start on time. But on the morning of February the 17th, 2018, Ryan was nowhere to be seen. At first, the other operators assumed that Ryan had been out too late the night before. He had told them he was heading to the silent disco, so that made sense. But it was out of character, so they wondered if maybe he just slept through his alarm. They sent text messages to check in with him, and then started up the lifts to begin another day. At Ryan's house, his roommates started to worry. His bed hadn't been slept in, and they hadn't seen Ryan since they'd said goodbye in the early hours of the morning. At first, they thought maybe he'd crashed on a friend's sofa, or maybe that he'd even met a girl and stayed out. Either way, they presumed he would just come back later. But when he didn't respond to their messages, and the day passed without any sign of their friend, they started to ask questions. The friends started with people in town, checking if they'd bumped into Ryan that day, but no one had. Then they began asking at some of the cafes and bars that Ryan liked to go into, but they hadn't seen him either. The friends even got people to check their CCTV, doing their own detective work to see if they could figure out where he went, but this didn't bring them any joy. The whole day passed and the tone was beginning to get darker. Ryan could not be located anywhere. It was now that the group of friends made a call to the authorities. The hunt was now on. It wasn't just the police that the friends contacted. They would also bring Ryan's parents, Heather and Scott, into the search, sending a text message that, in hindsight, was extremely ominous. "We think Ryan is missing." A call was also made, one which shocked the parents' interaction. Father Scott said, "I had an intuition. It was kind of strange. I felt the hair on the back of my neck go up. I told Heather, let's get our bags packed. We've got to go. Now." The doting parents left almost immediately to make the 9-hour drive to Sun Peaks. Heather said it was the longest and shortest journey of her life. Emotions were running high, and they had to pull over constantly to compose themselves. It's hard to imagine exactly how they felt, and frankly, I hope none of us ever find out. At the house party in the early hours of February the 17th, Ryan was seen getting up to leave, grabbing his coat and shoes. His walk home should have taken just 5 minutes. So what could have happened? Someone must know. They must have seen him, heard from him. Something must have been missed here. A search party was sent out immediately. The search manager, however, was already doubtful. He believed that if Ryan had been outside the whole time, he would not be found alive and well. Overnight, the temperatures had fallen to -4 Fahrenheit. That is -20 Celsius. It was hard to believe and highly improbable that anyone could survive that cold if they'd been out there all night without protection. However, the search party combed every inch of the area that Ryan was in the night he went missing. This included the direct route down the hill through the deep snow from the party house to his home. But even creating a grid and searching every square inch of that area, not a single sign of Ryan was found. At this time, there were no clues to help in the search. All anyone could do was to blindly try and imagine where Ryan could have gone, and then try to look there. Nobody was ready to just give up on the 20-year-old, so the search efforts were stepped up. Dog teams were brought in to try and trace Ryan's movements from the party house. However, these specially trained dogs could pick up no scent trail. It was as though he had simply vanished. But humans don't just vanish, do they? Everyone from the party house was tracked down and questioned. Police tried to uncover any new information. Had Ryan been seen fighting with anyone at the party? Had he shared some previously unknown plans? Perhaps he had left town to take care of something last minute. Maybe he had met a girl and was just spending the day with her. But after all of their questions, they were left with no answers. No new information was discovered. Helicopters were sent out to scan the area from above, but fresh snow had already fallen. This meant that if Ryan lay somewhere needing help, he would already have been covered by a fresh blanket of white. 20 centimeters had already fallen overnight. If he was unable to move, he would be entombed. Dive teams plunged into the freezing temperatures of the nearby lakes, breaking the ice on the surface to reach the bottom, but Ryan was nowhere to be seen. Some people had theories that perhaps Ryan had gone out snowboarding alone, that maybe he wasn't wearing a helmet, and he was now laid up in a hospital somewhere. But nobody ever received treatment that fit Ryan's description. Another dead end. Days passed, and with no new evidence coming to light, the police's time looking for Ryan began dwindling and finally ran out. Ryan's parents waited hopefully for news, but they were met with only silence. Volunteer search and rescue teams picked up where police left off. Social media seemed to be the key to creating this new team. Hundreds of people gave up their time, all in the name of hope. Volunteers retraced Ryan's possible steps, and they also went back over areas already covered by authorities. Nothing was going to be left to chance here. Father Scott said that every day was like Groundhog Day, every day a recurring nightmare. Back home in Alberta, the news of Ryan's disappearance continued to spread. His friends, family members, and even strangers were captivated by the mystery, touched by his story, and moved to join the search efforts in any way they could. People shared his photo on social media, hoping it would reach someone who might have seen him. Community members held vigils, keeping his story alive and praying for answers. Heather and Scott's hope started wavering. They now began to accept that Ryan was no longer alive. One evening, an elderly local guide who knew the mountains better than anyone sat down with the desperate parents. He had been volunteering with the search team, and he had walked every inch of the mountain with them, but he said he'd seen cases like this before. Sometimes, he explained, the mountain can seem to swallow someone up. He told stories of skiers and snowboarders who had simply vanished, sometimes found only after years, when snowmelt or new construction projects disturbed their secret resting places. His words, though not intended to, only deepened the parents' fears. To complicate matters further, a rumour began to circulate. It said that Ryan might have been seen by a few people leaving the party, and that he was with someone that no one could quite identify. The witness reports were strangely vague and sometimes contradictory, leading investigators down a road filled with dead ends and conflicting stories. Despite interviewing everyone at the party, police could find no evidence that anyone had a reason to harm Ryan, and no other sightings were confirmed. Hold up. How did nobody in the house party know where he went? That just doesn't make sense. Imagine the scene. Multiple people saw Ryan putting on his coat. Others say he put on his shoes too, yet somehow everyone there lost track of him. It's not even 100% confirmed that he ever left the house. And remember the search dogs. They couldn't pick up Ryan's scent leaving the house on Burfield Drive. So did he ever leave? If he did, why is there absolutely zero evidence? This is confusing. As the search continued, Heather and Scott started an online support page to keep their son's story alive, as well as using it as a way to gather any new information from people in Sun Peaks or beyond, anyone who might know something they had yet to uncover. The family used the page as a way to stay connected with the community, and community seems like it meant a lot to the Stuka family even before all of this happened. Mother Heather shares her thoughts on the website too in her heartfelt blog. We have lived in the same house in the same town since Ryan was 6. Our children have gone to the same schools, competed on the same teams, and played in the same playgrounds with the same group of kids. We all celebrated holidays with an extended family, and when Scott and I needed friends and family to help search for Ryan, they all came. All here, all searching. Those connections we made along the way have brought us to this juncture. We have met new friends. My angels, I call them. They have become equally as important. And I realize our friendships, old and new, will always be the blessings that will come from this tragedy. Our families will grow stronger. We will endure. The initial theory was that Ryan could have fallen into a gully, which had then been snowed over. But when the snow melted at the end of the season, there was still no trace of Ryan. There were no footprints, no body, no clothing, no blood when the snow melted. Ryan was just gone. Sun Peaks organised the memorial event in Ryan's honour. Friends, co-workers and strangers gathered to share stories and remember him. By the time another winter season arrived, the mystery of Ryan's disappearance still remained unsolved. Heather and Scott eventually returned to Alberta, carrying the weight of unanswered questions and unresolved grief. They couldn't shake the haunting thought of the Canadian wilderness, the same wilderness that Ryan had loved so much, possibly hiding the answer to their son's fate. There are many different theories from people both close to the case, living in Sun Peaks, and also internet sleuths. I headed to Reddit to see what real people believe may have happened. And remember, these are just theories, everything is alleged. User Grizzly Mall said,
I've been following this case for years now, and I think about Ryan almost every day. I used to live and work in Sun Peaks, so I'm very familiar with the terrain. As most people know, Sun Peaks has its vast share of seasonal and transient workers. Absolutely somebody knows something. Someone at that party knows what happened to him, and they could be anywhere today.
And that is a consensus among many people. Squeaky Cheetah wrote,
Lived and worked in Sun Peaks for 8 years. I find it extremely hard to believe he is still in the vicinity. What happened beyond that is anyone's guess, but I don't think he is still on the mountain. The rampant speculation about drugs online is something. Sun Peaks has its fair share of partying like any ski resort. However, it is a stretch of the imagination to envision anyone being killed over the small-time activities that go on up there. Hit and run, maybe? It's an odd case.
JCR 1981 SK replied,
I heard a rumor on one of these boards from someone that lived up there then that he has hooked up with a drug dealer's girlfriend and was killed for that, but nobody was brave enough to share that info for fear of their own safety.
Other prevalent theories are a hit and run or some sort of overdose. Deloom and Goom said,
I've always thought something accidental happened to him at the last place he was seen, and the people there panicked and dumped his body somewhere. I've also heard a theory that he was hit by a car and the driver dumped his body outside of town. Maybe they took what they thought was ecstasy and it was tainted with fentanyl, or he just got too intoxicated and aspirated on his own vomit. And the people around him were too scared to call 911 for fear of what it might mean for them.
And AC Canada agrees.
I think the being hit by a car one could be true, but I always found the wandered off one weird. Wouldn't he have turned up in the nearby vicinity when they searched? Or when the snow melted? It seems bizarre that when the snow melted, they saw no sign of him whatsoever. No clothing or anything. It's a weird one.
The police, residents and seasonal workers of Sun Peaks, and pretty much everyone that knows Ryan all seem to agree. Someone must know something. As weeks turned into months, the small community at Sun Peaks never forgot Ryan or his disappearance. And until there are concrete answers, I don't think people will ever stop talking. All signs now point towards the very probable fact that Ryan will never come home alive. Ryan's phone record, bank account and social media all have no activity on them. The last photos on his feed show him smiling into the camera, living his life to the fullest, both on the slopes and in the bars and house parties. The trip of a lifetime and the true beginning of adulthood and independence, sadly, this time ended in a dark mystery, with nobody even coming forward to claim the $15,000 reward. Every winter season that followed, Sun Peaks felt Ryan's absence like a shadow across its snow-blanketed hills. His story has become part of local lore, whispered among new lift operators, and remembered by those that knew him. In their hearts, Heather and Scott hold on to a faint glimmer of hope that one day the mystery would be solved. They cling to the memory of the day that Ryan first headed to Sun Peaks, his obvious happy nerves when he told Mum Heather he would be spending the season there, and the excitement of the adventure ahead of him with his friend. Oscar the dog still waits for his best friend. Oscar, you're a good boy. but I don't think he's coming back. At the time of this video, the search is still on. What do you think could have happened to Ryan? Please do let me know down in the comments. Be careful out there, and I'll see you soon.